Today's topic is something that I think is really important, but can be overlooked if we're not careful. We're talking about this hidden cost of leadership confusion. And, have you ever worked with someone who was maybe well-intentioned and they're smart, they're hardworking, they had your best interest in mind, they wanted people on the team to succeed, they wanted the organization to succeed, but in some way, you just didn't know what the priority was at any given moment. Or you did this week, but you were curious, like, what's the priority going to be next week? Because this week it might be we need to emphasize sales. Next week it might be operations. Next week it's the finances, whatever it may be. There wasn't a consistent plan that people were really operating by and working on, and it's because there was leadership confusion. One of my favorite books, Essentialism by Greg McKeown, he talks about less but better. And he talks about how we can get so tangled up in all the things that come our way. And I think that's where a lot of confusion in leadership happens. It's we think we're being productive, but we're really just being busy. And we're actually pretty scattered. And so today, what I want to look at is really I want to go through five key points that I'll actually give you a question to think about, to reflect on at the end of each of these points, because I think it's really important. And so this might be a little bit different. It might be a little more teaching than I normally do, a little less conversational, a little more teaching about this. But I think it's really important because of just the state of things in our world and in our businesses, because there are so many things pulling for our attention. There's so many things that we could be doing, chasing shiny objects that we think we're making progress, but maybe we're really not because there's confusion. So the first point I want to share with you is that leadership confusion is expensive. You may know this already as a leader. Maybe you've never thought of this, but most leaders think confusion really only creates frustration because that's what we feel and emotionally, when it's going on. Teams frustrated, individuals are frustrated. There's just maybe conflict between team members or the leader and the team because there's this confusion, but it actually creates hidden costs. Like people, are making different assumptions and going in different directions. It ends up making decisions be inconsistent. There might be accountability is struggling because it's hard to hold people accountable to unclear expectations or unclear priorities. Meetings can become longer, and literally time is money. When you think about your time or your employees' time, how much money are you spending in meetings that sometimes could have just been an email? Sometimes it just should have been resolved in 5 minutes, but we're debating it for 10 minutes or 20 minutes or an hour or longer because there's just not clear priorities, a clear vision, a clear way forward. And the big one here is that trust begins to erode because what happens is doubt starts to creep in. Even good people can be doubted. If you're a leader and you're causing confusion, you're not setting priorities, people start to doubt you. Even if they like you as an individual, they might start to doubt your leadership capability, and that trust starts to erode, and then that hinders the team. And the speed of trust is truly a real thing, that the more you trust someone, the more focused you're going to be, the less friction there is within the team to follow that leader. And so this is really important for you to think about. You also need to realize that because of all this, you end up putting out more fires when there's confusion. Because once again, this person thinks it's this thing that we should be doing. This person thinks it's another, a third and fifth and tenth person. Everybody's kind of got their own agenda or their own understanding, their own expectations, and it causes confusion. And so you put out a lot of fires as a leader, and you're kind of chasing your tail, trying to figure things out. And how do I get this team on the same page? But it all starts with that confusion that we haven't set clear priorities, a clear vision, a clear path forward. And it's something that, once again, it can be very costly with time, energy, and financially. And you need to really think about this. So, leaders start to say things like, I guess I just have to do this myself to get it done. That's a symptom. That's a symptom of confusion. If other people aren't getting things done, maybe they don't know what needs to get done, or maybe there hasn't been accountability structure set up for it to get done. Maybe what you think should be done today, they thought they had a week or 2 weeks or a month to get done. There's just not clarity. And so it's often not a people problem that you're dealing with. It's a clarity problem, but it shows up as a people problem. So it's kind of a vicious cycle that you can go through if you're not careful. But we really need to be mindful of this because leadership confusion can be very expensive. So the reflection question I want you to think about is where is confusion quietly costing your team time, energy, or trust, and even money? Where is it quietly costing you? Do you have a clear path forward? Do you have clear priorities? Do you have a clear plan that you're all working on? Do responsibilities and roles, are those clear? See, that clarity, solving those confusion issues can make a big difference. So that's point number one. Point number two is that activity and progress aren't the same thing. I touched on this already. Busyness and productivity are not the same thing. And this has been one of those lessons I've talked about on this show before that I've had to learn over the years. I have to guard myself against regularly because I'm a doer. And it's easy to just start doing things. And for me, the struggle is truly real. And for me, what I've had to do is really become more strategic and slow myself down and say, what is the plan? What is the way forward that we need to go that I need to sit down? And it can literally be a simple one, two, three plan on paper. It could be something more robust that's more of a team plan, whatever it may be. But activity and progress are not the same thing. Activity is just busyness. Progress is intentionality. And so busy organizations often make a mistake thinking that movement is actually momentum, and it's not. It's not. You need to be working in the same direction with your team. It's like being in a rowboat with team members, and one person's paddling forward, another person's paddling backward, another person's sitting there without their paddles in the water. One person has their paddles in the water, but they're not doing anything, so it's just creating drag. There's all sorts of confusion, but when you start getting the team rowing together in sync, that's when the magic can happen. And then there's sometimes I heard this years ago, somebody said, on a team, is there somebody in the boat who's actually drilling holes in the boat, causing the team to fail? That was a big aha when I heard that statement one time is, do we have the right people, but are the right people doing the right work? And then is there somebody who's sabotaging us? Maybe it's intentional, maybe it's not, but the reality is somebody's drilling holes in the boat and there's a leak and there's a problem. We're going to sink ultimately. So people can be working incredibly hard. Maybe you find yourself working incredibly hard, working long hours, trying to get things done, and there's just not progress. Well, that's because it's likely that there's confusion in the whole setup of what you're doing. And sometimes this is confusion from the top down in a larger organization. Maybe priorities, maybe plans aren't clear from the C-suite down to the front line. That can happen. Or maybe it's on a team that maybe the team leader, maybe the team hasn't gotten together and huddled up and said, okay, here's our priorities that we're going to be working on over the next 20, 30, 60, 90 days, whatever it may be. And here's how we're going to tackle this and put the plan together. But great leaders continually answer four questions. And this is what I want you to be thinking about. Where are we going? So that's the vision piece, right? Where are we heading? Why does it matter? That's purpose, right? It's that start with why concept that Simon Sinek has made famous over the last decade or more. So where are we going? Why does it matter? What does success look like? This is a big question because I can think success looks like one thing where my team member thinks it looks like another, and a third and fifth people, they think it looks completely different. So we need to define not just where we're going from a directional and vision standpoint. Not only do we need to understand why it matters, that purpose piece, but we need to understand at the end of this, it's the Stephen Covey idea of begin with the end in mind. What does success look like? When we're done with this project, when we're done with this initiative, when we're done with this 90-day cycle, whatever it may be, what does success look like? And then finally, what role does each person play? This is where accountability can begin. Because if I know that you're doing this and I'm doing that and that person's doing the other things, then we know who's responsible. And as leaders, we need to make sure that we are casting vision, setting that direction. We need to make sure we're clarifying why it matters, what's the purpose behind the effort, what does success look like when we're done with this, and then who's doing what and by when. You can leave the how up to an individual. The bottom line is you need tasks, you need initiatives done. So how you do things may not matter if it's different than how I do things. But at the end of the day, are you getting your part done to put your piece of the puzzle in to help contribute to the team? That's what's really important. So use those four questions. Where are we going? Why does it matter? What does success look like? And what role does each person play? Those questions can solve a lot of confusion. And if you do that on the front end, you prevent a lot of frustration, stagnation, and issues on the back end. But without those efforts get scattered. or without those answers to those questions, rather, efforts get scattered. But with them, that effort actually compounds, and that clarity can actually expedite and speed things up. But you have to put in that upfront work of getting clear on things that many people just honestly just don't take the time to do. Sometimes it's out of the pressure of just their schedule and the tasks that are already churning. Sometimes it's just out of innocent ignorance where they just haven't thought about it. But the reality is, don't let your effort be in vain. Don't just confuse activity for progress because it's not the same. Point number three is that clarity creates confidence. This is huge. The clearer you are, the more confident you're going to be about what you're doing. The clearer your team is, the more confident they're going to be about the initiative, the project, the thing that they're doing, and their specific roles. See, people perform better when they know what's expected of them, how decisions are made, how success is measured, and where priorities rank. So when those things are clear, people have confidence. They can just kind of show up, do their work. They can be responsible for what's on their agenda and what's on their calendar. They can report back with more clarity because they know what they're responsible for, and that matters. So it reduces anxiety and it increases ownership. And ownership is huge. I'll never forget when I heard a speaker years ago, this is probably 20 years ago now, talk about, just, creating ownership within an organization. And, an owner of a company would be walking through the parking lot, and if there's trash on the ground, they're going to pick up the trash because it's their property and they want their property to look good. But if there's not ownership, if an employee shows up and they're like, that's not my job, this isn't my property, I don't care, and they just walk past the trash, they don't have ownership. And I know there's a fine line because owners do have ultimate authority, they have ultimate benefit of the company being successful. What a lot of people forget about, though, is owners have a lot more stress and anxiety because they also have the weight of the world on their shoulders to keep things moving forward. And so ownership is not an easy thing to take. And there's a lot of people out there, unfortunately, that they're literally showing up just to get a paycheck. That's why this show matters so much. That's why this whole concept of being a magnetic leader matters so much, is that when you can truly build a team of people who care because you care about them and you develop them, you equip them, you give them the resources they need, all the things that we talk about in this show. When you do that, it matters because it creates a desire to act like an owner, that I have ownership, even if I'm not the owner, quote unquote, in the company. I feel like I am an owner in the sense of responsibility. I want the team to win. I want the organization to be successful. So when you're clear and give them that confidence, it truly creates more ownership. It also allows people to solve problems without waiting for permission. And this is huge. When you're clear about objectives and timelines and roles and responsibilities and all the things, it gives people that freedom to say, you know what, this is mine to deal with, or I know who it is that's responsible for this, and I'm going to go right to them instead of having to go through some other confusing hierarchy and kind of run into walls about who's responsible for what. So being clear, it really does it. It speeds things up. That's that speed of trust piece is coming back is I trust who is responsible for this. I know who's responsible for this task or this initiative, and I'm going to work directly with them. If there's a problem, I know who to go to solve it, or I have the authority and the capability to solve it. I don't just have responsibility about it, but I truly can. I have authority. That's important for people. See, as leaders, we think our job is simply to motivate, but honestly, a lot of it's just removing uncertainty and creating clarity. Yes, you need to motivate people, but at the same time, people are really self-motivated. And that motivation comes when they're feeling confident about their role, their responsibility, their freedom to operate. And so when you give them that and you're clear about all the things we've talked about so far, now they feel more motivation because they don't have a lot of questions swirling in their mind. They're not doubting, they're not wondering who's responsible for what is to be done next and who's supposed to be doing that, or I thought you were doing that and no, I thought you were doing that. Like all that confusion, it doesn't motivate, it demotivates. It makes people feel like they're just in some form of chaos in their work environment. And so don't just think about motivation, think about the actions that create an environment for self-motivation of your people. Because when that happens, when there's that certainty, when there's that clarity, that motivation elevates. Point number four here is that simplicity is a leadership discipline. Simplicity is a leadership discipline. I love this point because I always tell people I'm a simple guy. I learn in simple ways. I teach in simple ways. I like to do things simply. I don't like clutter. I don't like confusion. I don't like complexity. I want simplification. I'm not a minimalist as has kind of become trendy in the last, several years. I don't think I'm a minimalist, but I am close to it in a sense. In the sense of maybe I'm a simplist. I don't even know if that's a definition of a person, but um, I love simplicity, and I love how complexity kind of disappears when things are truly simple. But here's the problem: most organizations, almost all organizations, drift towards complexity. If you're a solopreneur, it's easy to drift towards complexity and put all these things on your own plate. If you're in a company with multiple divisions, with multiple locations, all the things, that complexity just continues because when people are involved, complexity can happen because one individual can make a simple plan complex if you're not careful. So you have to guard against that as a leader. So fighting for setting things up as simple is really, really important as a leader. And if you can simplify for your people and with your people, it just makes everything so much easier. Yeah, I love the story of Steve Jobs when he came back to Apple after having been ousted by his own company years prior. He came back and I forget the exact number, but it seemed like there was like 400 products or something at the time that Apple had, and none of them were doing great in and of themselves. And he really worked hard with his team to simplify and strip down what they offered, and they kept it very simple. And because they did that, they got it down to a handful of products that then could really take off. And now, if we look at Apple, yes, they've grown and they have more components and offers, but really at the bottom line, they have computers, they have iPhones, they have tablets, and then they have accessories, right? So I have a MacBook laptop. You could have a Mac Mini desktop. You could have a full Mac, desktop. You could have any version of iPad that's out there. You can have an iPhone, different versions, different years that have come out. You can have AirPods. But the reality is, if you think about it, even for such a big, big company, at least their product offers are pretty simple. And once again, yes, they've expanded over time, but it's really not that hard to describe what does Apple offer. If you go into an Apple store, you're going to be able to see the different segments, the different types of products they have simply in their stores. It's an experience. And say, if I want to go look for an iPhone, I can go look at the iPhones. If I want to go look at the tablets for the iPads, I can do that. If I want the desktop computers or the laptops, like where to go. If you want to look for accessories, there's an accessory wall, a couple of them actually, on different sides of the stores. I can see them in my mind right now, and at least in our Apple store where it's designed. And so the reality is that complexity creates confusion, it creates problems, but simplicity, being a leadership discipline, can really make things really go. I think about my job with our Chamber of Commerce and what we do. We offer networking opportunities. We offer business strategy sessions to help our members to be successful. We offer connections. We help people make connections to one another. But we've really said, what are the key things at this time that people really need? And so we just have a handful of things that we do over and over again to help build that momentum. We don't want to have too much complexity in our organization for our community and our businesses because it's detrimental. So we try to keep things simple. And so now people know what to expect of us as an organization. They know what our calendar looks like. They know what they can expect from us when they call or email and say, "Hey, can you help me with this problem or this situation, maybe this opportunity?" When we have new people entering the community or new businesses and they call and they say, "How can you help me?" It's an easy conversation because there's just a few things that we really focus on and make sure that we do to support our members and support our community. That is a simple model. It's easy to explain, it's easy to have great conversations, and I'll tell you this, it generates results in a crazy way because people are like, "Oh my gosh, in 5 minutes you've told me all these things that you can do," but it's really not that complex. It's simple. It's like, what do you need? Do you need discounts and benefits for your team, your employees? Okay, we can help you with that. Do you need networking opportunities to meet people in the community? We can help you with that. Do you need, support to just kind of brainstorm on your business and make connections? We can help you with it. Like, when you do things like that, it really helps clarify. And then what happens is those people who are benefiting can go out and tell others this is what our Chamber of Commerce does for us. And so what is your business model? Can somebody clearly explain, just like Apple says, hey, we do desktops, laptops, phones, tablets, and accessories. That's five things I just named. Now I know they do other things. They've got iTunes, they've got the iCloud, they got all these other things, but they all basically come back to and support those core offers. So over time, what happens is you end up keep adding without subtracting. And that piles up into this heaping pile, and it becomes a problem. You start adding more initiatives, more meetings, more policies, more reports, more competing priorities. That's the other thing about the essentialism book that Greg McEwen really talks about is that this term priorities has become plural in the last 100 years or so when it used to be literally singular. Because if you have five things that are priorities, you really don't have a priority. You have five goals, five objectives, five things to work on, but you don't have a key priority. Now, if you say, here's our five key things we're going to get done this year, and team one is going to do this, team two, three, four, and five are going to do this, then they have a singular priority that they need to focus on. And so I think you can take multiple goals, multiple objectives, and turn them into dedicated singular priorities. But a team or a person has to take ownership and be laser focused on that thing without creating complexity. So strong leaders continually simplify. They don't simply oversimplify the work. They simplify what is going on. They simplify what matters. They say, let's not create confusion. Let's not have a bunch of clutter. They say, what can I do today, or what can we do today to strip this down to the minimum viable product or the minimum viable solution that we need to have for this issue or this goal, this objective. So if your team can't clearly explain your mission, your priorities, and what success looks like, they're probably trying to accomplish too many things at once. So ask yourself those questions of what could be simplified? What is complex that needs to be simplified? Or what used to be simple but now has become complex? And what do we need to do to rectify that? So that's an important part. Simplicity is a leadership discipline. And then finally, point five here is that culture follows clarity. Healthy culture, it's not created by writing values or statements on the walls. Those are reminders. But, I heard years ago the quote that, it's basically a question of is what's written on the walls happening down the halls? Think about that. Is what's written on the walls happening down the halls? I've been in organizations where I've seen values on the walls, and I'm like, that's great. But do people become blind to those, or are you truly living them out? And the clearer you are, the more you repeat those goals, those objectives, those values, the vision, the mission, that you're telling people, here's what matters. Here's how decisions are going to be made. Here's how you're expected to treat one another as employees and team members. Here's what we're going to reward as an organization. Like when you're communicating that clearly, it truly builds a culture because there's consistency. And as I've said many times on this show, I'm not going to go down this path too far, but consistency is an X factor in leadership because if people know what to expect from you consistently, and not just from you as the leader, but also from the team, so the team culture, then it just makes things go so much smoother. There's less friction in the organization. You could truly get what Gino Wickman in his book Traction talks about, that you can get traction in your business because you now have alignment. And there's so many organizations that start out with alignment. There's this initial burst, like, hey, here's our mission, here's our vision, here's our goals, here's what we're going to do. And this can even happen in a long-standing company, but it happens like at the beginning of the year, and we say, okay, and this year, here's what we're going to accomplish, or in this quarter, here's what we're going to accomplish. And then a week in, 2 weeks in, a quarter in, all of a sudden there's all this mission drift. There's all this priority drift. There's all this confusion that can happen. And so as a leader, you have to fight for this. Because if you don't, this confusion is going to overtake things and it's going to make your business struggle. See, confused leadership creates inconsistent culture, but clear leadership creates a consistent one. And consistent culture is what ultimately multiplies results because when you are able to have the team going and rowing in the same direction and everybody's exerting their energy in the same way to help be successful, they know where we're going. They know what success looks like. They know what boundaries there are. They know how we're going to treat each other and our values and the mission and vision overall. then how this project fits into that, that purpose, that why. Why are we doing this in the first place? When you have all those components that we've talked about in the last few minutes together, it truly is a game changer. So here's the practical challenge I want to give you as we wrap up for the week. Ask three people on your team these questions. If you don't have three people, ask one person. If you don't even have one person, if you're a solopreneur, ask somebody that knows what you're up to and see what they have to say from their outside perspective. But here are the questions. Number one, what's the most important priority for our team right now? Number two, how does your work directly contribute to that priority? And number three, if we could improve one thing over the next 90 days, what would make the biggest difference? Those three questions can be game changers and they can be refocusing points for you. But you have to do the deep work. You have to do the hard work of actually slowing down, asking the questions, humbling yourself, being ready to answer. I mean, you need to listen carefully. You need to see what they say. And if the answers are significantly different than, from one to another, or what you thought they should be, or what is in your mind, then you've identified one of your greatest leadership opportunities. Clarify those things, simplify things, fix the confusion, and that greater clarity will actually improve your leadership credibility and your ability to influence and impact your organization, be able to grow your organization. See, leadership isn't about controlling every decision. It's about creating enough clarity that good people can consistently make good decisions without you. Think about that. It's about creating enough clarity that good people can consistently make good decisions without you. And here's one of the biggest hangups for so many leaders is too much is dependent on them. How much is dependent on you? If you left for a 2-week vacation, what would happen when you get back? If you left for a month, what would happen? What if you're gone for a quarter? You see, if you work now doing the upfront work of getting things clear and setting things up so people can be successful and making sure roles and responsibilities are established and standards are set and accountability structures are put in place. When you have that, that it's not just all about being on your shoulders as a leader. See, when leaders provide clarity, trust grows. We've talked about that a lot today. Trust, ownership increases. That's important. People feel ownership toward their task, their team, their project, whatever it may be. Culture strengthens. That's the game changer in our world today because that reduces turnover and strengthens the team and the speed of getting things done. And ultimately, because of all that, then what happens is results multiply. So when your trust grows, your ownership increases, your culture strengthens, then your results can truly multiply, which is really what business leaders are wanting. We want to grow the company. We want to grow our revenue. We want to grow our client base. We want to expand the business. We want to go farther, faster. Those are the results we want. But too often we focus on those without doing all the things that build up to that. So are you leading yourself well and becoming a leader worth following, being trustworthy? Are you developing your people so that they are better trusted leaders as well that others want to follow? Are you focusing on building a healthy culture that people want to be a part of and that not only retains the talent you have, but also attracts the kind of talent you want or you need in your organization? Because when you do those three things, then you're ready to multiply results. But until you do those three things, you're going to keep hitting a ceiling. It's the law of the lid that John Maxwell talks about. There is a lid, and it's a leadership issue. And it's so often because people aren't leading themselves well, they're not developing their people well, they're not building strong, healthy cultures, and yet they want results that really the structure can't handle. And that's a key thing that I heard years ago when I was first starting my business was be careful of wanting results that you're not capable of really managing. It's kind of like when somebody wins the lottery. It's so common that relationships are damaged, they go broke, they have all sorts of financial and legal issues because they weren't ready to handle the windfall of cash that came their way. Well, in leadership, it's similar. If you haven't built a solid foundation with your people, if you haven't built a solid, trusting foundation with who you are from a character and competency and trustworthiness basis, and you haven't built a team that truly knows, likes, and trusts each other and it's healthy, then you're not ready to scale. You're not ready to grow to the levels that you would envision and want to grow. So that's one of the reasons I created what I call my magnetic leadership system. It's going through these four phases of leading yourself, leading others, building culture, and then multiplying results that I walk individuals and teams through, because the reality is organizations don't just multiply results by simply working harder, which is what often happens. They multiply results by multiplying leadership, by developing people along the way. Not everybody it needs to be or is going to be a senior level in the C-suite, but everybody can improve and have leadership responsibilities and roles within the organization. Even if they're the team of one, they need to learn how to lead themselves well, to manage themselves, which is often the hardest person to lead, as we often talk about on this show. But I just want you to be thinking about all this. Don't let confusion be the enemy of your success. Don't let yourself be sabotaged by the hidden cost of confusion. Focus on what we've talked about today. Ask yourselves the hard questions. Do the deep work with yourself and with your team. Ask an outside objective person to help you. So here's the thing. If today's episode has challenged your thinking, I want to encourage you to do a couple things. One is share with another leader that you think would benefit, who wants to build a stronger and a healthier culture themselves. And two, go to my website, McClureCoaching.com, if you need help, and schedule a strategy session. It's a free strategy session we can schedule and talk about your goals, your objectives, your challenges, the opportunities you have in front of you. And we can talk about how this magnetic leadership system model can be a part of your plan to really get everybody on the same page and then make sure that your goals are actually achieved. So keep focusing on building leaders, keep focusing on strengthening culture, keep going after those results that you want to multiply, but do it the right way and make sure that confusion isn't attacking, hijacking your vision, your goals, and your team. Take care. God bless, and we will see you next time.